The end of the amazing digital circus, the final act, is coming, my friend. And here I'm going to talk about all the possible theories we could think of and also some leaks that came out about this series. If you're from the future, comment if I was right or wrong. Let's go. Music by... How important is Ribbit within the universe of the amazing digital circus? This little frog that's showing up everywhere actually has a much bigger mystery, to the point that she's the main focus of the digital circus finale. Just so you have an idea, there have even been some images released that are supposedly even posters, from the events that Glitch is participating in and promoting out there. Whether it's real or not, I honestly don't think it is. But the number of clips that show her, giving her a lot of attention, and also highlighting her relationship with Calf is honestly overwhelming. Like, for example, this one from Colgar, which a lot of people asked me to comment on. It's just a music video based on the digital circus. But it's really interesting to think that all of this has more to do with her past, that she used to be a much more optimistic character and all, but over time she kept dwelling on a huge guilt, and that ended up making her go crazy. We know she's a mysterious character, but the circus hinted that she might have even worked at the digital circus through the series. Oh, remember? Kingo is that character we saw who was one of the first to enter the digital circus, and he ended up staying there for a long time and was the last of the original group who ended up getting trapped inside the circus. One of the things I even wanted to mention is that when Belle's adventure happened, some information about members who might have worked inside the digital circus showed up, like these names here, which suggest that Calf was there. And you could even say that Ribbit also worked inside the digital circus. The thing is, there's a theory here that a lot of people don't understand, right? When we saw Cain's origin, that he was an AI who ended up absorbing another one that Scrat was working on, well, we can see that everything Cain ended up doing inside the circus wasn't just a consequence of him creating the adventures. He must have also received new updates and external information. It's good to remember that in the beginning, Cain was pretty much alone, and then he was updated with other expansions, so to speak. One of them would be Bubble. Bubble wasn't there when the circus began, but from a certain point on, he started to get this update that was meant to, expand his creative capacity and also his ability to interpret. Basically, it was something that someone had put into Cain's code and that also helped him have more possibilities for all the adventures and creative ideas. And then we stopped to think that, well, if Bubble wasn't there and it came in pretty much after Hagata, it's good for us to understand certain things. When Cain was there, inside the digital circus and ended up alone, Kingo was also stuck there for many, many years. It suggests that from the time Kingo entered until the second person from the secondary group entered, which was Hagata, it was a span of 8 years. In other words, after 8 years of the digital circus already running, that's when a second human entered here, besides the original code, which makes everything much more disturbing. Remember that Cain said that was actually something he didn't believe was possible. As other people started to enter, we can understand that someone from outside CNA might have tampered with or even modified the game's code or even Cain's code to make it so that other people would be taken inside and have their digital consciousnesses trapped inside the circus. And why am I talking about Ribbit in this video and focusing so much on Kingo and Cain? Well, as we know, there's this bizarre theory that she worked at CNA or that she had some kind of contact there. And in a way, she might have done something she regrets. Remember that all the members of the circus have memories from real life, but they're manipulated because of Cain's AI. And when we remember the teaser for the end of the circus, we see Ribbit saying just one sentence. Jack, have you done something you regret? And man, this frog here isn't innocent. If she really was someone who worked at the digital circus, for sure, she would really have to regret having set up a system that secretly copied some human mind or human copy into this AI universe, and that ended up getting stuck inside the digital circus. She would have done not only that with her own mind, but with other people's too, showing how dumb she is. So, yes, she knows there's no way to leave the circus, which leaves everyone here in a really heavy mood for the end of the digital circus. We know that Ribbit's parts will just be flashbacks, but we're going to have a big focus on Jax. And Jax is very connected to this frog, and in a way you could say he practically depends on her to, exist inside the digital circus and live within this philosophy of life. Maybe she told him a lot of things and he just ignored it, didn't take it seriously. But we know they did fight because of the relationships inside the digital circus. And it's good to remember that for a long time, he kept saying things like, hey, inside the digital circus, no one here should be taken so seriously and all, and everyone should act like a cartoon, because that's how everyone should be. In the beginning, he knew, and he tried to act like a Pamin, looking for a way out or explanations, but he ended up leaving everything aside. So, you could say that it was because of Ribbit that he started to have this other point of view because he learned from her that there was never an exit, there was never an escape. That's why he was always skeptical and was always made fun of for it, because he realized that he's stuck there, along with everyone else forever, and that would be the best way to keep things going. Which makes this story extremely harder to deal with from his point of view. But, coming up with all these bizarre theories, you can't just believe that Jax is a much more sensible guy either. He's a guy who practically enjoys chaos and tortures everyone. But if Ribbit had so much information and had talked to him about regrets, it's logical that he would have told her things he had done in real life too. But the point is that he ended up arguing with her about a very heavy, much deeper issue on a personal level, where one wanted to be friends, the other didn't. One talked about caring for others and the other didn't. We saw this glimpse in the episode. Jax keeps staring at a snow globe here basically, which was from one of his past adventures, and he stays there like almost in a trance. And we ended up seeing here things that they argued about, but it's kind of a messed up audio, so some people just theorize about what was said. But actually, we can't be sure of anything until the episode comes out. It was only dubbed in English, and in the other languages it's just background noise, so we can't understand anything. This frog is one of the digital circus's biggest mysteries, sparking many theories. But I have to tell you something here. You can't believe that the story of the digital circus is going to make these characters out to be something much more tragic than they already are. We know that their story and their conflict is much more about emotions and not about really deep secrets. We saw here, man, the whole relationship between C and A being explained by Kingo in a way that doesn't go into much real-life detail. And I believe that Glitch won't include scenes with real people since, what happened in episode 7. Because people went to visit that street, they went knocking on people's doors. No exaggeration, really. The thing with Jax here was unbelievable, because in less than 2 hours they had already figured out where that street was. And man, this is really bizarre. So, I really believe that Glitch won't show anything, at least about real life, in future editions. Maybe they'll even cut, for example, the images and flashes of real life here, try to blur them, something like that. But any explanation about the past in C&A will only get off screen. Just like Kingo ended up saying, the end of the digital circus is getting closer and closer. Now the thing is, Ribbit is a very important character for this story. But she's just going to be a stepping stone for us to understand why Jax is acting so strange, why he went so crazy, and how unhinged he is. I'll explain that right now. We have such a strong focus on him in close-ups that don't even show his eyes, just zooming in on everyone's face. We're going to see him really crying in this episode, freaking out and racking his brain. Let me tell you. This frame here from the trailer, just the fact that it doesn't show his eyes, maybe it means he's going crazy right in front of us, and they just cut that out, and we don't know. Jax is the only one who won't survive at the end of the digital circus, and you can already imagine that. One of the things I know people didn't ask themselves in this teaser is that in episode 9, the trailer always showed everyone's face. But Jax, he only appears in flashbacks. When his face appears in the present, his eyes are covered. He's freaking out. He's abstracting. And everyone is watching from a distance as he succumbs to this end. This big focus on Jax freaking out in the trailer is very symbolic. And as we already know, this scene here is cut. Glitch does this in their trailers because they want to hide something. And Jax, he's really losing it. We've already seen him having these little mental breakdowns, especially when he's alone, when he's facing other situations, other adventures. He's the guy with nowhere to return to after leaving the circus, since almost everything good he has is there. Even knowing that's his reality, it's not a good one. Actually, he's more trapped there than anyone else, because the digital circus has to be his safe place and also his refuge. But when Glitch ended up releasing the first image from episode 9, which was literally the circus crew and Jax on the outside, left out, going into the darkness, while the circus crew stayed in the light. In a panic, he was basically there, dealing with the situation that he would have to accept his new reality. He's having panic attacks because he did something in real life that we don't know about, and he ended up at odds with himself. But the teaser itself shows Ribbit asking if he regrets anything he did. That's because she knows exactly what he did in real life and got into conflict with him because of it. Remember, the Digital Circus is based on a book that inspired the well-known game I Have No Mouth, and I Must Scream. I was surprised to learn it's on PlayStation. Use the link in the description to buy it. But that story is quite melancholic. We have a group of humans who are trapped in the domain of an AI and are tortured with various psychological situations. And these simulations mess with their greatest trauma, and they live eternally inside of that. Just like in the Digital Circus, we ended up seeing that those humans, just like in the book, managed to deal with the AI temporarily, but that AI ended up coming back to torture them later. And the only way they had to save themselves was literally to destroy themselves, because without an organic body, they wouldn't be alive to live eternally in that chaos. The Digital Circus suggests that this ending will be similar. Even, with that calmness. Everyone believes that Cain is gone. A lot of people believe he might come back at the end. But there's also the possibility that he won't return for the end of the circus. If Cain comes back, he'll torture the players. But since he might not come back, Jax could freak out because of that situation. Because they would succumb to a much more tense and dangerous atmosphere inside the amazing Digital Circus. That server won't have a way out for them. And surviving that won't be easy at all. The trailer itself already shows the Digital Circus with a much heavier atmosphere. Except for flashbacks, we can see, that everyone is really traumatized, and Jax is the only one whose face doesn't appear. I truly believe that this scene is hiding Jax's face by zooming in. Exactly, so no one knows that he's already having a panic attack at the beginning of episode 9. This is gonna be, his end. He'll probably become abstracted or go crazy, because he won't be able to adapt to this reality. He was doing really well, with the Digital Circus adventures, but he was already starting to lose his mind every time he was alone. Now that Cain is gone, his mind won't be occupied with the other players, and they might even try to find some kind of exit, or even break open the exit to escape from the circus. But the thing is, he's the guy who doesn't really have anywhere to go back to, and maybe he'll end up staying so he can sacrifice himself so the other players can escape. There's a strong possibility that somewhere in the circus's code, one player needs to stay there to keep the server active so the others can escape the Digital Circus. And he would be that character who actually has a bigger motivation to stay there. I'm really unsure about this theory when it comes to fitting him together with King, because King is that guy who also ended up losing his wife in the circus. But he would still have a career and maybe could work on the outside to help restore the minds of the abstracted players. He is a very valuable programmer within the Digital Circus universe. Jax, he couldn't do anything good in the real world. So, when we see scenes where he's there like messing with everyone's head when they're in a hurry to leave, and they still question him, pushing back on him, saying that maybe he has someone waiting for him. When they ask him, his expression changes completely. He looks different. It's like, clearly, he doesn't have anyone to go back to. He has no reason to leave the circus. Maybe for him, that place was much better than anything he ever experienced in real life. The way the Digital Circus works shows that several characters inside have had traumas in real life. Everyone went through some really tough situation. Kingo had his AI, which was practically replaced by a more advanced AI. Hagata had family problems, Pamini had a monotonous job, Gangle had self-esteem issues. Everyone went through some problem, whether it was about acceptance, career, or anything else, and that affected their personality. Jax is the only character whose real-life story we don't know exactly, but everything suggests that he did go through something really bizarre. And maybe he could have denied a lot of that, precisely because he knows that it could be a manipulation by Cain. But when he thinks that it's real and he talks to himself, having a panic attack, it's very likely that he remembered something in real life that he did that was so cruel, or that his real life is so ridiculous that he doesn't want to go back there. I imagine that the idea of Jax's sacrifice is the best moment for him to have his big redemption. The main story of the circus is pretty much focused on him, and he's gradually grown over time. Cain's torture basically takes all the experiences and memories that the players still have, and that he had access to, in order to create situations that are uncomfortable. Take Jax, for example. He was basically the target of everyone's bullying, and the other players would have ripped off his mask too, showing who he really is, even though he was trying to hide. This here, is a very symbolic sign because it shows exactly how fragile he is. He always put on a tough guy mask, trying to create an image that wasn't really him so he could, feel stronger, even though he actually is one of the characters who suffered the most, or who also made other people suffer in the Digital Circus. It's that symbol, of the oppressed wanting to become the oppressor. The Digital Circus puts a lot of signs like this in each episode, and Jax is pretty much the biggest example of that. A lot of theories and animations came up because of this, highlighting his close friendship with Ribbit because, they were there together and they ended up spending a lot of time together, getting closer. Ribbit really was a character who got very close to him, and he probably ended up getting close to her, giving her information, and she also ended up going crazy. A lot of people in the circus, especially Hagata, blame Ribbit's abstraction exclusively on Jax, because Jax wasn't the kind of guy who, was a good influence on her, and that ended up putting Calfimo in the same situation, where she, along with him, started abstracting and went crazy inside the digital circus. Man, the clips about this are great. I'll put them in the description so you can see how people imagine this circus story. But still, Jax is definitely going to end up succumbing here, because he managed to adapt well to that playful universe, where nothing was taken seriously and everything that happened could be reversed. For example, we know that Gangle, who has a mask that can break, not just her happy mask, but her sad mask is going to break too. For example, I imagine that famous mask, from the CLT adventure where it was made of plastic, it had that black and white eye. We saw this in the teaser. This mask is going to end up returning in the next episode because maybe we might even witness a kind of death of the circus, because if Gangle's mask ends up breaking, whether it's because of Jax or any other character, this might be the only way maybe to connect the tape and make her breathe and exist again inside the circus. I imagine this is going to be a trigger for Jax to go even crazier because he kept bothering Gangle. And yes, she might also have connections or even recover part of her memory through this, so that everyone can move toward a much more dignified ending in the circus. This explains, for example, the scenes with doors and a big maze. We can't be sure these theories will happen, I'm just guessing with you, but whenever we consider Jax as the main focus, we picture him already freaking out at the episode's start. The panic attacks were already coming, he was already going crazy in each of the scenes, we saw him almost lose his mind in episode 7, that was supposed to happen. And we don't know if he had a hallucination of Ribbit, precisely because of Cain's influence, since it was an adventure. But we never saw him manipulating things inside the players' rooms. But we know that the layout of the rooms is meant to trigger some personal memory of each of the circus players. So, a lot of bad things are still going to happen, but Jax is the main point. He could be the guy who helps everyone save themselves, or he could end up sacrificing himself, or sacrificing everyone else with the intention of making sure no one gets out. If he has to leave along with everyone else, he'll make sure the other players don't leave, because he won't want to leave. But if he could choose to let everyone else leave and stay behind himself, he could even be the key figure capable of saving everyone else's lives. Because he knows that nothing good for his life awaits him in the real world. And he can use that as a kind of consequence for doing something good because he really cares about the other players, but I don't like to take any of this too seriously. There are some people here in the comments rooting to see if he will survive, and there are those who think he will go crazy. Comment below which side you're on. I've discussed theories where everyone escapes, he gets trapped, or all get trapped, but this is a great topic to talk about with you in the comments. Jax, he could be the hero of the digital circus, who we think is invincible, a completely toxic villain, but who ended up sacrificing himself so the others could get out. It would be a fitting end for the series and him too. Man, Cain is coming back for the finale of the amazing digital circus, and you're excited to find out what's going to happen, and in fact, the creator of the digital circus has started giving little hints of spoilers that might come, and I want to talk about that with you all right now. Sorry about my voice, but man, I couldn't let this moment pass, okay? Because I know you're excited, pumped about this, and so am I, because man, the hyper-focus is intense right now. Let's go, man. I posted this on my YouTube community tab. It's basically a composition of 3 photos. This is pretty crazy because we've been imagining and theorizing about Cain's return since the end of episode 8, where he could return not only through a backup, but there are also people who believe he will become a new AI. Or that the AI he ended up absorbing was split in 2, and he could come back with what was left. But then comes that question, right? He was always obsessed with bees, and people started to believe that actually that would be a kind of sign that he would be back and he would return as a bee AI. I'll tell you what I think in a bit, but this is the theory that everyone saw. I don't know if you remember, I think this is episode 6, where he shows previews of other adventures. And there were drawings of bees, including one that has a shape very similar to Cain. A bee too, look. And this is really interesting because for the first time we're seeing what this big bee would be. This bee here is literally inside the poster for the final episode that's going to theaters next month. When we come here and end up entering this poster, we notice things that were published by Glitch itself. And Glitch kind of tries to draw attention to some of these things that are being shown in concept art. I know this is pretty mysterious. The creator herself even said there are secrets in here anyway. Then we started to see, for example, other official artworks showing up in movie theaters like these posters here, alright? Brazil hasn't shown any signs so far that it's going to get it, but yes, these posters here suggest that some artworks might, spoil the presence of that bee. This image of the same poster even showed up, but then, look, remember I said the creator paid so much attention to, this chandelier here, this lamp? So, look who's here next to it, the bee itself. I know, the bee that Cain loves so much. Man, we can believe that, in a way, Cain might return as a future NPC, but without administrative powers maybe, to be able to deal with the whole environment of the digital circus. We start to imagine this because people started saying that Capcom could become a third EA, since it would not only have the combination of red and blue colors, but also the yellow color associated with the bees in the circus, which would actually be the third most important. I'll be honest, I think this theory is a bit absurd, although I do question the origin of this image here. But I wouldn't be surprised if the image of the bee was actually something relevant. After all, we have a lot of things here that are pretty mysterious for the end of the circus. But then things started to show up, things that nobody could have imagined, which are what? The famous fan art here inside the digital circus, creating fake trailers that ended up going viral. Ah man, this is a profile that if someone takes a look and knows a bit about the circus, they'll think this is actually something official. There are comments asking if it's official, but no man, it's not official. Even so, it's a fan art that makes complete sense. We already have information that Jax is going to be completely out of place, literally in this final environment of the digital circus. He's freaking out. I mentioned in the last video that the fact that at the present moment Jax doesn't appear with his eyes showing is a cut from the series to try to hide his eyes, which are basically in a frenzy, in a panic attack. He had a safe spot inside the digital circus, which was what? The madness of the circus. Since Cain's madness ended and the circus is no longer what he used to use to create that mask, man, he's going to be forced to go to that corner and be more real. And this is what breaks him. This is his final moment. So what happens? People started looking at these profiles here and began to believe they were real. This profile, for example, posted these images. I'll tell you guys that these images they're not real at all. For example, there's this one here. This image here of Jax, literally in the dark with a light. This is edited, it's bringing out the colors, but it's from a music video, a remix music video. I've already talked about this video. I talked about it with you guys and you saw it. This, man, is a song by Daisy that was released on the internet. I think it was even before episode 8, so don't worry, alright? So much so that when I get here, look, for example, here's the channel. Then look, we found the same frame, the first frame that was there. I know a lot of people end up seeing that image and thinking it means something, but actually it's not. The hype for the end of Digital Circus is here and everyone is anxious. But man, I have to come here and tell you what's really going on. So much so that other shots show up here. The guys are just turning the image black and white. I have a comment here saying, look, they literally took the image from episode 6 and just put it here in black and white. And that's it. And people are believing it, man. People are believing it. Same thing here. Look, this here is Calcium in the pilot episode. And the same thing here. We have Gangle literally alone. Alone, right? But if you look closely, this close-up here is edited. Look at that. It's episode 7. They just cut everyone else out, right? I'm not even going to say it's AI because I know it's not. It's basically just a cutout. It's content, it's rare, or whatever. Anyway, it's something really easy that you've been doing in Photoshop for years, and the guy left it in black and white. Same thing here. Literally Jax with the stars and everything. Why did people start getting worked up about this? Because literally Gooseworks is famous for leaking things, replying to comments, and there she ends up leaking literally a lot of things, a lot of insider information. And there's more than one profile that showed up. For example, we have this one here. Man, this would be great if it were true. In this image, we see a hallway with the exit door and Pomni on one side and Jax on the other. We know that the clash between the two will end with one of them determining the way out of the circus, and this is inevitable. Because, man, there should really be a way out of the circus, even in the digital circus after all. The problem is that not everyone will be able to leave. The thing is, since their bodies have been motionless for so many years, well, it's possible to imagine that their minds are still alive inside the circus. But not everyone will be able to escape because their bodies have already deteriorated. You could say that, for example, about Kingo. Kingo is a character we believe won't return to the real world, because first, he has no one to return to, his wife is gone. So, he probably thinks there isn't much of a way for him to return, and maybe his messed up mind is a remnant of him having been left with an unconscious and dead body in real life. But like, when we stop to look, this profile here is basically dropping a bunch of information, but it's not that big, it's not that like unreal. There's the trailer, there's, for example, the popcorn bucket. I don't know if this is real, man, but, well, I imagine some theaters would take advantage of the hype to make the popcorn bucket, because the digital circus has grown so much that a lot of people would buy it. And the popcorn bucket here is nothing special, you know? It's just artwork with each of the characters. They're just the artwork that's on the poster and stuff, and that's it. What comes after that are images and things that Glitch themselves have already released. The rest are just memes. Literally here, another of the same image of Jack sitting, but here he's staring at Ribbit's door. That Ribbit's door has already appeared in official Glitch announcements, which isn't a big deal. And then, it falls into that whole artwork category. Much weirder things that the creators are sharing here. These are fan arts. Here we have Pomni abstracting, and this one is much more realistic. I would guess it's Ya, because man, this style here isn't from their fan art or their official art. Yeah, I mentioned that because you can see, for instance, at the exit that it's a bit crooked, especially in the vectors of the little exit character by the back doors. The same thing happens here with Jax in being swallowed, and the eye pattern on the abstractions is completely wrong. If we stop to look, for example, why did his eye fall here? No, literally, his eye fell here. There's an eye down here on his neck. This would be the position of his mouth. It's completely wrong here. Yeah, image of Ya, and people are falling for it. Other than that, it's more memes. Here we have Zubo staring at the exit door. Here we have a black and white image of Kingo, Pomni too. Oh my goodness, if the abstraction was just this here in her eye, it would be great, but it's weird. The same thing happens here with the other images anyway. This is bizarre. People think it's real, but they're actually cutouts from other episodes. They were used to create new artwork. And finally, here we have the figure of Abel. People believe he'll be the bubble, right? Even today, after the latest episodes and all, and she would become the great master of ceremonies. Who should actually be there together with Cain? Man, actually, no. This is just another delusion. Man, I don't know if the bubble will have a big role at the end of the circus. Actually, the bubble is a character we don't really understand what it is or what's going to happen. The creator even said that the bubble was erased along with Cain. But whether it was really erased or not, I don't know. Let me tell you something. There were 2 trips, there were files from O'Kane. They were there at the end of the circus when Kingo was hacking, and the creator showed up, clearly answering that she was erased along with Cain. The creator, she's already leaked a lot of things, and she's lied a lot because of the hype. Because she really wanted to mess with the heads of the fans who want to know what's going to happen and all. So, the creator might have said that just to make us think she was really gone. But man, coming from her, it could be true, it could be a lie. And she's already leaked things from other episodes that weren't in the trailer. She's already made fake leaks, so nothing surprises me anymore. The thing is, we have a lot here, including a synopsis too, which I don't believe is real, okay? We're about to witness the end of the digital circus as it completely collapses. The truth is that no big revelation from Glitch will show up here on the internet until the movie is released in theaters, and you can be sure of that. I wouldn't be surprised at all if a new trailer came out, for example, a week before the premiere on YouTube. We're going to see the movie in theaters, the digital circus finale, 2 weeks early. I think after 1 week, Glitch will likely release the trailer, inviting everyone to watch it together on YouTube. I plan to join you all there. It'll probably be the 3rd time I watch it because I ended up buying 2 tickets, right? Like I said, as you saw here on the live stream, I ended up buying the subtitled ticket because only the subtitled version showed up. I thought there wouldn't be a dubbed version in theaters, and then the dubbed version showed up and I bought that too. So that's it, man. Let's wait and see. I have more to say about the circus ending, but let me rest my voice for now because I never stop working. I'm really excited for this ending, and I know you are too. Look, my friends, is Cain coming back at the end of the digital circus or not? There's a leak about it. And man, since you can tell it's a possible spoiler, let me warn you right away that this video might spoil the digital circus ending or not. Because I'm not sure if it's real or not, since the sources end up being very conflicting. But we have this theory that Cain should come back for the digital circus finale. And now we have to discuss this because there are leaked images and synopses out there. Understand that this is possible. I'll talk about it now, and I warned there may be spoilers. Let's begin. Cain disappeared at the end of the last episode. His disappearance was completely emblematic after he started freaking out and attacking everyone, but the question is, man, was he really erased? Did he really disappear? This is something that a lot of people got upset about because he just disappeared without any effect or anything. And the supposed leak about him comes from this poster here. The creator herself even said that everyone who goes to the movies should look at this little lamppost, this little light. She said it stood out and was distant from everything and everyone. The thing is, this lamp is, in a way, an incomplete version, because it seems that some posters will be released with an updated version of this artwork. Why am I talking about this? Because some theaters managed to leak a different poster. It's this one. This is the poster you already know very well, right? And the thing about it is that it's kind of weird. Why? When you look at the lamp, you find a new character showing up here. And this character is a bee. This bee isn't here alone. There's a little hat behind it. I know the resolution is really bad. But man, this bee has already appeared in the series throughout several episodes. And then comes the question, what is this bee? What is it? Is it an NPC? Why is there an NPC inside the circus if the circus is already collapsing? Well, this bee here was actually drawn by Cain, and Cain was always fascinated by bees. Actually, if we even look at the source material, the reference to that book, you know, I have no mouth and I must scream. We notice that Yin, that AI that practically dominates everyone, is fascinated by bees because bees are creatures that shouldn't be able to fly, but they manage to fly. They do what technically would be impossible. Then comes this question. Cain in the digital circus is the same way. When I posted this in the community tab, people kind of freaked out. Why? We saw here, for example, Cain always drawing some things, and several of the drawings always involved a figure of a bee. Not just him, but there was also the shape of the bee bubble as well. This here, man, is his fascination, because he really must like the figure of the bee a lot, and the bee is going to be a very important detail for him. But then comes the question, man, why would he come back as a bee? You know, the digital circus should already be collapsing, and here's where a theory comes in. Maybe, you know, after the circus collapsed, the members of the circus, along with Kingo, will probably try to bring Cain back, because at some point they'll realize that it's already the end. In fact, it's the end of everything. They have nowhere else to go. And why am I saying this? Because they would try to bring Cain back. Because man, with Cain, it's much safer than living without him. But they would try to bring him back with limitations so that he wouldn't manipulate other people's lives or create dangerous adventures. Actually, as an NPC, so he could interact with everyone, he would be more like a companion, like a helper, the way Bubble was for him, you know? So that's how he would come back. It would be a smart way, but this wouldn't save anyone. I'm saying this because supposedly a synopsis leaked. Here there's a possible Wilder leak, but I don't believe it's real. I'm just saying in advance, I think it's fake. But it's good to talk with you guys because every theory is valid. The synopsis that some theaters ended up releasing is this one. In the final stretch, the circus is falling apart. As Cain's code disintegrates, Pomni and the others find the true way out. But only to find out that it doesn't lead to the real world, but to total deletion from the system. Amidst the glitches and abstractions, the group needs to make a final decision, to continue existing inside the broken simulation or to accept their consciousness to escape the trauma of the tent. The curtain falls, and for the first time, Cain loses control of the show. And that's good for us to understand because when we remember the past of the digital circus, we know that all the abstractions would fall into the basement. I think this mention here is cool because people are focusing much more on the exit, but the abstractions are on the loose, and we already imagined that, right? When the trailer came out, we saw the circus totally collapsing, and we already imagined that the abstractions would be out on the loose, including Jax's abstraction, because we already imagined that he's going to end up going crazy here in the digital circus. Then comes this question. Man, Cain was actually one of the abstractions that were breaking inside the digital circus. In his own way, but he was. Without him there, the abstractions will end up getting out through there. The thing is, since the circus is now darker and much gloomier, we can already imagine that the abstractions won't attack directly because the environment is probably more suitable for them to stay calm since the light ends up attracting them to attack. Now, when we go back to the first episode where everything was starting, we have here the grand finale where they fan out, right? They spread out toward the end of the circus, right? Leaving through the tent, leaving through the void, and from there, they go straight to the computer. I think this is really important because there's that Soma theory where all the players of the amazing digital circus would literally be trapped with their digital copies inside their minds. Cain, he has already said several times that he made a perfect computer program to create bodies that are compatible with digitally copied minds. This isn't just a random word. Besides that, you have to remember players from many years ago. When Kingo was hacking Cain to erase him from the digital circus, man, there was data there showing that Cain was created in the 90s. Kingo had been there since 99. Jax, Pomini, and Hagata joined years later. Hagata has been there longer, but the difference between her time there and Kingo's is 8 years. So Kingo lived there for 8 years before Hagata showed up. More than twice that time has passed since the other players joined the circus. So it's impossible to imagine that a body could have stayed in a coma for so long and survived. And when we remember the beginning of episode 8 where an AI was being fed, and this AI, which we can understand as Cain, was creating things and evolving. But after receiving a lot of information, it started to go into a state of collapse. Why? It started to break down, literally. It became chaotic, the shapes no longer made sense as it tried to create new things and more creative forms, so it was imprisoned. And what happened is that it literally ended up absorbing another AI that was apparently improving. This AI might also be related to the project that, Scratch was creating at the beginning of Digital Circus to achieve a certain kind of digital immortality. The problem is that when Cain, this first AI, breaks free and ends up absorbing Scratch's project, it ends up causing everything to collapse. She actually started trapping people inside these adventures of the circus, and she began to become chaotic. As we saw, Cain was being completely chaotic towards the other players in the digital circus, psychologically manipulating them and torturing everyone throughout each of these adventures. What happens is that this wasn't something he believed he was doing until the last episode we watched. But then, when he starts making everyone feel bad and all, we realize that this also ends up breaking and making the players go insane. The thing is, since he wasn't meant to create these adventures, he was an extremely limited AI even though he did a lot inside the circus, but he was really breaking down and making everyone turn into an abstraction. When the digital circus reaches this end, abstractions would be pretty much the most inevitable path for the digital circus. We saw that several players went in there, but apparently they ended up trapped in the circus not because they wanted to, but because their data was thrown in there due to the absorption by Cain's AI, which was entering that network. He was surprised when Hagata entered because he believed that other players wouldn't be able to get in, so the program worked. So, when we hear in the synopsis the idea that an exit really won't exist and that everything could lead to the deletion of the digital circus program, man, this would be something really crazy, because that ending where we can imagine that Jax will be the last one left in the digital circus, and the other members would accept the deletion from the program because leaving would basically mean letting go. It could make total sense. Man, I want to remind you of something from the pilot. When Pommy was out there in the void, and it was a place that not even Cain knows how to handle, man, this is really interesting because she was in a complete trance. This might not exactly be her connection to reality, but actually it could be her connection, or rather the state she would enter to go into a trance while her data starts being deleted. This would be interesting, like an ending that wouldn't be happy, but tragic. Actually, the digital circus is very likely to end up showing what happened to the humans in real life, while the players in the circus end up dying, being erased. Maybe even the people, their real-life selves, find out what happened to their players, their avatars, if XCA still exists. Anyway, this is an alleged leak that we can take into consideration. Since this little bee appears on the poster, it might be real. I look at this image and I start to believe it could be real. The little bee could be real. The bee has been there since the beginning of the digital circus. Cain, he's really fascinated by bees, and could he be reborn as a bee? Maybe, but limited so he doesn't torture the players in the circus. but he would only be there to try to delay the inevitable, which is the collapse of the digital circus, and believing that there's no way out is a possible ending. The Soma theory exists. That Netflix series The Hollow, which I talked about millions of years ago here on YouTube, it's possible for them not to have a happy ending, and I think you better prepare yourself for that. I don't know if Glitch would release such a tragic ending for them, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happens, where no one can escape the circus. They live there long enough for each one to go insane, and in the end, they end up getting stuck there and decide together to delete the digital circus so they can have freedom in their minds. When I remember this ending here, where Ribbit talks about regretting something like that, a lot of people found it very ambiguous. Ribbit is a character we know almost nothing about. We can even assume that she worked at CNA. But when she talks clearly with Jax about escaping the circus, I think it's not even about escaping, but rather about succeeding. For example, regretting something. I don't know if she's talking to Jax, asking him if he really regrets something he's done in real life. His past is also a mystery to us, but she could also be a character that we have theories about, that she might have actually worked at CNA. We can imagine that she was also one of the people partly responsible for getting the Scratch program up and running and recruiting new humans. Maybe she worked on this AI that digitally clones minds for this environment, which indirectly ended up sending everyone to the circus. Maybe it could even be a little worse. Could it be that someone, some user or employee from CNA, ended up messing with Cain's AI, making the two so close that one could absorb the other? Well, these are just possibilities. We'll see about that soon. By the way, let me tell you something. I have to thank you for the messages from the last videos I recorded here with my voice totally messed up. Guys, thank you so much for the support, but I'm alive, so it's going to get better. It's going to get much better. But I need to tell you this very clearly, and I'm going to be very honest as well. I prefer to work while I'm sick and keep working rather than, live knowing that I could have worked more and didn't. That's it. The digital circus hasn't aired its finale, but dramas and cancellations have already happened. Glitch recently released a statement here about some screenings that are being shut down and canceled due to censorship issues and also some logistical issues. And this ends up showing us that it's not so easy, man, to deal with the digital circus. Especially because it has a kind of strange stigma. A lot of people believe it's purely a children's animation because of its video game aesthetic and bright colors. But we watched it, we saw that it goes way beyond that. Actually, it deals with very adult themes, and if you're a minor watching Circo Digital, you really should stay away from it. And since Glitch ended up releasing some official statements here, these cases of censorship pretty much show what it is, and even some themes that might appear in this last episode that's going to end the whole saga. And my friend, yes, I know that some things here are just theories, but man, this is kind of unintentionally hinting at some of the possible endings for the circus, and that's what I'm going to talk about here now. Guys, ever since we watched episode 8, a lot of things have been hinted at about the ending of the amazing digital circus. One of them is the question of whether everyone inside the digital circus is basically dead or not, and at the same time, there's also that situation where many can't deal with their own appearance and existence. When we stop to read, for example, the ending of the amazing digital circus, and remember that the characters' traumas involve, for example, very sensitive situations, it's easy to understand that some countries would basically refuse to screen the amazing digital circus movie. Man, they say exactly that some regions of the world are practically rejecting the distribution of the digital circus because of certain censorship laws. And of course, something that's very common when dealing with this is that certain productions are practically altered while they're still in development. I don't know if you've heard these stories, but man, there are places where censorship is so heavy that it changes form. Here's an example. Sandy Cheeks from SpongeBob practically gets a dress when she appears without her astronaut suit underwater. Man, this is one of the weirdest things, but it happens. So I have to tell you, man, it's a good thing you're in Brazil, because Brazil is an extremely hypocritical country when it comes to censorship. We have, for example, the Carnival Parade, which is rated for all ages, and of course, Woody Woodpecker, which gets a 12 or 14 plus rating. I remember this meme. This meme is so true, but yeah, things like this happen in our country. And the thing is, man, when it comes to movie distribution, we don't have this kind of problem in Brazil. But many of the themes that were reported as being off limits for the characters in Digital Circus and what will be in this finale give us a certain idea of what to expect in the ending of the circus. We know Digital Circus has already gone way beyond the limit with several very sensitive themes and topics here. I really like to remember, for example, the torture scene that Cain put all the players of Digital Circus through. Literally, we have a scene of Hagata's mother throwing knives at her own body, which suggests it's something that happened in real life and also at her own eye. Man, this is something that would hardly go unnoticed on TV nowadays. If Digital Circus, I don't know, aired on TV Globinho, this would definitely be cut. Or it would probably cause some kind of action against Rede Globo for showing this. Because it's a pretty heavy scene. In this kind of case, a lot of movie theaters, for example, would rate this much higher. In Brazil, I haven't seen any kind of age rating issue, especially because, man, it's not being distributed as a real movie. It's more like a special event. And since it was categorized like that, man, the responsibility kind of falls more on the parents who end up taking their kids to this kind of movie theater, okay? Because if it were distributed as a real movie, man, then it would have to be approved, go through a theater. There's a whole logistics process, let me tell you. It's really annoying. It's very bureaucratic, having to talk to lawyers, copyright lawyers, distribution lawyers. It's an extremely bureaucratic thing. But, as we already know, many of the scenes that are also causing problems for the end of the circus are here, in these scenes right here. And if we saw, for example, those tortures, man, the end of the circus suggests that these scenes might also be repeated at the end. We're not just seeing the players' fears, we're going to see what really happened. It could be shown graphically right in our faces, but it could also just be the characters describing it. And even so, that's already subject to censorship. In the case of Hagata, I think it's very brutal. I don't know if they'd have the courage to animate this here to show Hagata reasons why she wouldn't want to go back to the circus world. Because we know that the digital circus has that two-way street. There are players who might want to leave the circus, but they wanted to leave because Cain was there making their lives miserable. But there's also the question, do they have anywhere to go back to call home? In Hagata's case, I imagine not. But then, man, besides that, we have other scenes that are more complicated to deal with at the end of the circus. In this case, it's Gengel and Zubul themselves. Gengel is a character we've been theorizing might have suffered a certain accident. That fear came back here at the end of the last episode. A truck runs her over. And then, we keep wondering, man, does this really have anything to do with what happened to her in real life? I don't think so. Because at the end of the CLT episode, she also ended up getting run over in the digital circus. This could be an explanation, for example, of how she might have gone into some kind of coma and her mind was uploaded to the network so she could enter the circus. Alright, this would be a pretty ambiguous ending for her, but there's also that other theory that Jax committed crimes in real life, and in real life he ran over Gengel, even though they don't know about this connection in real life. Since we already know the circus story, real-life characters may know each other but won't know who they are inside the circus until a certain trigger happens that makes them realize who they are, in the case of Kingo and Queenie, his wife. Now, when it comes to this damn rabbit here, would he really have done something in real life? Man, a lot of people suspect that. And this could be a topic that might have prevented a lot of what would have been the circus's conclusion. I can't say for sure, man, because it's glitch. She is being very meticulous in her statements, because if she goes into detail about what kind of censorship it was, she'll end up revealing to everyone what happened at the end of the digital circus, and that's something she won't want to do. Because no one will want to get a spoiler like that because of censorship laws, but it's very unlikely that it's something graphic that's gonna show up. To be honest, the theme of running people over happens very, very often in the digital circus, and it's very much linked to Jax, but stop and think. Would this actually be something he did in the digital circus and would show up here again? We know that Jax did something really terrible in the circus. And this has been theorized for a long time, and since the last trailer shows several scenes of everyone freaking out except for Jax, because we don't see his eyes. And we know that he's the main focus of this last adventure. Literally, seriously, I've already told you guys, all the close-ups here don't show Jax's eyes. Because we know that when his eyes show up, he'll be abstracting. But we saw that in the teaser itself. Ribbit is here asking or saying something, right? If he's ever done something he regrets. This is so ambiguous. It could be about something she did that she regrets, or something he might have done. And she asked if he regrets something he's already done. We know he did something really serious. The creator is saying that he did something really serious. All the scenes suggest that he did something terrible. But what is it that's so terrible that he did? Well, this alone is already enough to get censored in the digital circus. And I think that's terrible because we're left here waiting to see what will happen, and so far, we don't know anything. Now, Zubo is a very problematic character, and she's also one of the main targets of censorship, at least from what I understand. Why? She's a character whose context always makes the character's transgender identity the main focus here. She practically seems like a character placed from the creator's point of view inside the digital circus. Both of their avatars are the same, and man, she has that thing where you can swap body parts to have your body the way you want, which hints at that issue of identity. Zubo herself already had a whole issue in the therapy episode that made a lot of parents freak out because their kids were watching it, because they realized it's a matter of gender identity, personal appearance. So she would also be a character who could raise a lot of issues for censoring the digital circus, and that's how it is. The digital circus, man, to be able to attract a lot more people to the theater, it would need to be less censored. Man, I know it would be much easier to make it for ages 21 and up in theaters. But man, theater chains know that when a movie is released with a very restrictive age rating, there's a big chance the theater won't fill up, and that's a loss for them. Empty theaters don't make money. So they would want every possible rating because of that. Besides, when it comes to government issues, there are many countries that won't let these topics go through. Man, Digital Circus manages to have one of the most widely dubbed shows on YouTube in several different languages. But it's no use doing all the localization or even censorship for certain topics. Basically, they just want to erase the existence of these people too. I know it's a very sensitive topic, but that's exactly the main issue here. And since we're talking here about a project created by a trans woman, man, you can be sure that any topic related to that, she would never want it to be, cut or censored. So for people who are in those places, pretty much the only thing you can do is hope that the world gets better. Because honestly, this is going to upend the expectations of anyone who might watch Digital Circus. Now, I have to say that the hype for the finale is so big that even music videos are popping up here, especially focusing on the trio Ribbit, Calfamo, and Jax. Of course, we don't know exactly why they fought and all that, but we have that theory that Ribbit and Calfamo might have worked inside the Digital Circus. That's a real possibility. But we don't know anything beyond that, because it's just sketches that were thrown around over a few episodes. Even so, the hype is here. Man, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. If you want to know more theories about the circus, check out my channel Theories for You. I'm waiting for you here now. The Digital Circus finale is coming. But unfortunately, we know that not everyone can have a true ending. That most mysterious character is Hagata. She might also be the one who won't be able to have a decent ending. That's exactly because of everything we ended up discovering because of the Soma theory. They wouldn't have a body to return to, and she wouldn't have anyone to come back to. That's what I'll discuss in this video.
Então já manda salve, se inscreva, deixa like e comenta aqui, cara, se a Hagata realmente...
There's a chance to get out, because I'm going to shatter your expectations in this video. Let's go, my friends. Hagata is that character that a lot of people have already argued with the creator of the Digital Circus about because of her screen time. If you don't remember, Jax started to gain a lot of prominence. And he always was the focus of every episode. But a lot of people were left wondering what path Hagata would take in this story. And she's more important than we think, because she was there when pretty much everyone in the circus joined. Except for Kingo, she's the oldest of them all, man. And that's really surprising for us, because I used to believe that Zubo could be a character who had been there longer than everyone else. And that would explain why she just didn't want to take part in the adventures, because she was already fed up with everything that was happening. But let's be honest, it was actually the opposite. Actually, she was the character who surprised Cain, giving him hope that other humans might show up. When Cain was left alone with Kingo, and the adventures basically died down for a while, since they needed other humans to be able to take part in the adventures, well, Kingo wandered around there for a long time, and suddenly out of nowhere she just shows up there all startled because she had put the headset on her head, and suddenly she ended up inside the Digital Circus. Man, this is an interesting question since many people have theorized about how she got there, but to understand, you should know why she couldn't return, alright? She's a character who suffered a lot inside the Digital Circus, but man, not even that suffering compares to what she went through in real life. When we end up seeing Cain's tortures, man, she was literally the one who suffered the most in real life from her own family who should have been her safe haven. Ever since we learned her story inside the circle and she started to open up, we understood her as a character who wanted to take care of everyone because she wanted everyone to be okay. The problem is that she actually suffered, and that's why she acts this way. When we saw the torture scenes, her torture is one of the most disturbing because she's in a dining room and then she's being attacked with knives by another figure who looks like her but much bigger, older, and more dominant in that scene. What does that mean? That means she must have gone through a really heavy trauma with her own mother and wouldn't even react anymore. She would just endure the attacks. Man, the stabbing thing is really literal here when we realize she literally doesn't have an eye. The button eye was a metaphor we had for the rag doll. But man, this actually wasn't it. It was actually because she lost an eye in real life, and we had never asked ourselves that because of the way she looked. I imagine that Cain, at some point when he was creating his virtual bodies based on the digital mind copies of each member of the circus, created this body here for Maria, you know? So that he could make her a character who would fit in really well with her look inside the circus, since she would be, for example, a complete character. In fact, all the tears she has in her clothes are actually because of many injuries she had in real life. Now, stopping to think about a situation like this, would she really have a reason to want to leave the digital circus? Well, it's good to remember that she just went along with everyone else, since a lot of people want to leave the circus. But the thing is, she might actually be a character who would be fine staying inside the digital circus, precisely because there she wouldn't have to deal with her own family and could live day after day, moment after moment without suffering. That was the case until Pomni arrived and disrupted everything in the digital circus. Remember, she's been there for about 8 years since she first joined. That's almost half the time Kingo has been there, you know? And the thing is, she went in there and changed everything. She's been there so long that she's already adapted to this reality. But why would she stay inside the digital circus now if the circus is broken? When we look at the end of the digital circus is literally gone. The environment is in ruins because Cain left the game and the code is fragmenting. But Hagata could be a character who might end up adapting because we believe there's a cooler ending. In the old Baldi scene where Kingo explains how the digital circus works, he says that actually everyone has the power to create things and summon things. This could be a possible ending for the digital circus since we have this theory that they would actually have the ability to escape if they really wanted to. So they would have to make that place a safer environment so they could live there. That way, man, with the digital circus completely broken, they could rebuild that place using that administrative power that Kingo ended up mentioning. Cain can create things because he already has more experience and time creating things, but the other players can summon these objects whenever they want. Kingo can only do it when he wants to concentrate. Pomini was able to do it when she was at the exit door, so the other players could do it too. And that could be the starting point for us to think that Hagata would stay inside the digital circus. Especially because that could make it a much safer and friendlier environment for her, just the way she always wanted. Since she's used to the circus, she could live there forever without any issues. I'm saying this openly because when Kingo was hacking the digital circus, we saw here some small bits of data about when each of the players could have entered. For example, Cain was created in the 90s, Kingo joined in 99, and Hagata Man only joined 8 years later, a long time after. And of course, since the series also takes place several years later, with theories saying it's been going on from 2014 to 2017, it's understandable that there wouldn't be bodies for them to return to, remember? The digital circus, there's a possibility that they're just digital copies that were kidnapped into this circus environment. And they are not the human minds, not the real minds. When we remember that episode of the Digital Circus Adventure, Kingo wanted to say something to them, but he simply couldn't speak because of the flash that went off in his head. Yes, he knows there's no way out. And we will see this answer, literally, when the Digital Circus reaches the end of this upcoming chapter. It's going to be a shock. In fact, if everything happens this way, we can imagine that Hagata will be the one who adapts best to the new universe of the digital circus with everything broken, but able to be rebuilt with each of their creative powers. Because they will understand that what's inside is just digital data like them, and they could manipulate it however they want. That would be a much smarter way to survive throughout all the time they can stay there, since they are practically immortal and could stay there for eternity, or until their bodies are corrupted because of the abstractions. I believe that by accepting existence as it is and being true to themselves, they can live there forever. Since many other players could have abstracted and didn't, Hagata was one of them. But Kingo? Wow. He's a character who's been there for such a long time, for so long, that the fact he's still sane and functioning is practically a miracle. We don't know exactly if he's ever tried to mess with the coding of his own brain, trying to keep himself functioning smoothly as always. That's because he only lets his sane mind work in the darkness, and when he's in the light, he's just glitched. Given how the circus works, maybe this is just a protective measure he created for himself when he wandered alone in the circus for many years after everyone else abstracted. The thing is, this is pretty scary, but he was the key factor in keeping Hagata whole inside the digital circus at the beginning, and it's very likely that he'll be the key to making Hagata stay there. She's the third most commented and voted character and one of the most beloved in the digital circus, even though she's not the main character. Even so, there's a lot of hope that she'll be the one who will be able to handle the unfortunate truth that there is no exit from the digital circus. Kingo is going to make a great sacrifice, and that would be his leaked ending in the amazing digital circus. I'm letting you know that all of this is supposedly an audio leak from the voice actors. Because since this series is being dubbed for theaters, and basically the ending is already in the hands of many people, it's inevitable that things like this end up happening. We've seen this happen before, and with Circo Digital it wouldn't be any different, so I'm already warning you about a possible spoiler in case this is real, because there's a chance it might not be, and this video could be useless, so come back in the future and tell me if what I said here is true. Throughout the amazing digital circus, we've seen Kingo's major trauma, and he might be the character who ends up sacrificing himself to save everyone. The leak says exactly that he would have a line telling everyone to go ahead and he would stay behind. Precisely because he wouldn't have much left to go back to, while the others try to make their plan to escape Circo Digital work. Is this really something that would be very good for Kingo to see? Well, this is a kind of theory that doesn't make sense to me because he would be saying this to other characters who it seems we don't know. The scope of the digital circus at the end suggests that actually all the players would somehow meet the other members of the circus who have already been there. I'm talking about all the members starting with Hagata. They wouldn't just be restored abstractions, but rather a way of bringing back the backup, or what was left of their human minds, into the digital circus. That kind of thing doesn't make much sense to me because an ending where not everyone makes it and some have to sacrifice themselves. Why would some need to sacrifice themselves in a virtual environment like this? It doesn't make sense to me, and I believe it wouldn't make sense to you either. Because you see, we have the concept of abstraction, and the real shock of abstraction shows up here in every moment inside the amazing digital circus. One of them, for example, is Kingo's wife, who literally disappeared right in front of him, even though he tried to spare her and was thrown into the basement along with the others. But that's the thing, the abstractions were still in use inside the digital circus. In theory, restoring it would be a way for Kingo to use his technical skills to bring everyone back. We don't know exactly what that would be, but the function of the abstractions would be to drive you insane and disconnect you from reality when you're inside the digital circus. But as we saw in the last episode, Kingo would be the guy actually capable of hacking and modifying the data inside the circus just by using a computer that he basically imagined was working and connected to the code. That's what I find most impressive. He could have access to another computer once again, just to be able to guarantee all the members of the digital circus not only a chance to access their human minds, but also to recover those who were once abstracted. When we looked at that last poster which talked about the final act of the digital circus, a lot of people were left mesmerized looking at butterflies. A mysterious post that has a bee and is hidden in the original publication, but we also forgot to notice a detail. It's full of several cracks, and among them there are some eyes. These eyes would be the abstractions that are escaping from the digital circus. This is one of the things that ends up scaring many of the people who follow the digital circus because this could break their expectations about the return of the abstractions, but that's how it is. Cain might not be the guy who actually created the abstractions, since he doesn't like the idea of humans one day being able to get out of there and, in a way, escape from their primary function. This is such an important point for us to understand because the digital circus, even though we might think that Cain was the guy capable of manipulating everything and everyone, he really didn't want anyone to abstract. He got furious because of that. So we have to remember that there are other former employees of Glitch's digital circus, I'm talking about C and A for God's sake, who were inside the digital circus besides Kingo. And that's really important for us to remember. People here are freaking out about Calpham and Ribbit, but there are theories that they were actually employees of CNA. Sketches from the escape from the circus suggested that other members might have worked at the circus. With this thing about Jax, I think that would be absurd. So if they worked at the circus, this makes sense with the scene that's in the trailer. When that damn frog shows up in front of Jax and asks if they've ever done something they regret, maybe she had done something she regretted. Actually, stop and think, those original members of the digital circus weren't necessarily all humans who worked there at CNA, but people connected to it. And when we stop to think about it, we understand that the abstractions were showing up there. And this could mean that some members of the circus were entering this state of abstraction because of complications in the code itself, with the intention of keeping them all excluded so other players could join Digital Circus. And this could have been done by current members of CNA who were still working inside the circus, working at CNA, because they wanted to test this artificial intelligence more and more, pushing it to the limit. Maybe that even explains why the bubble wasn't there at the beginning, but showed up right after the abstractions and especially after the regatta. That could actually be a way for someone from the outside to really try to push Cain to the limit and make that CNA AI test go too far. Why did you say that? It's because we ended up discovering that an AI was being fed a lot of code, and it seems like it was being pushed to the limit because that was the experiment CNA was using. It's a technology, development, and artificial intelligence company, and they wanted to create an AI so good that it could, for example, create situations where it could absorb other information and other AIs to become more and more powerful. We understand that the red AI would actually be Cain, who ended up absorbing Scratch's AI in an attempt to be better than the original. When he ends up fighting with Bubble, Bubble says that the other one was much better than him. And this would make sense because there would be an AI rivalry, and Cain was being replaced by a more powerful one, and he wants to be the best because he was the first AI and doesn't want to be replaced. That's exactly it. And Bubble here, man, is literally that character who's going to make Cain freak out. Actually, most of Cain's breakdowns came from Bubble. He doesn't exactly control what she does, but it seems like she was planted by someone from outside, trying to make each of the members, or rather, Cain's development actually, reach its true limit. We discovered this at the end of the last episode, which broke the entire digital circus and left it in ruin. Now, it seems like we can imagine that, given all the leaks we've seen from the circus, and Kingo being as clever as he is. He might be able to try to restore the code to prevent other players from abstracting and could bring other players back from abstraction by messing with the source code, just like he ended up messing with Cain. If he manages to do that, he can bring the other players back. And if he manages to bring the other players back, he can make it so the other minds can, for example, share information about what happened while he was inside the game. What happened with CNA? What did they change in the code? What happened with the AIs that he just doesn't remember because he's been there for so long? This man would be a really important turning point. And I truly believe that not all the members who are there are actually humans with their minds connected inside. It's very likely that even that story about Adele, well, some of those inside the digital circus are actually just digital copies, and others might be real humans truly connected. That would be really important for showing what the real outcome would be. If the leak about Kingo being that guy who just lets everyone escape while he stays behind, it could be a resolution showing that he is actually a digital copy of a human mind. He could be that guy, that's why he simply didn't abstract, unlike the others who ended up abstracting. Those who became abstractions can come back, but the one who ended up living all the adventures is one of the programmers, Kingo. He stays to be able to save the code and make sure the real humans can escape, because he would actually be a single digital copy, and the others would be the ones who truly deserve it. Man, sorry. To me, this is one of the craziest theories, and we could sit here talking about it and all. Because even if everyone hopes that everyone gets out, there really is this possibility that some might just be digital copies trapped inside the circus, while the others were actually humans who had been trapped there for a long time. This could even be a plausible explanation for this kind of sacrifice scene, and it would be a big twist. It could also explain why Kingo didn't get corrupted by becoming an abstraction. He was a digital copy, so only humans could become abstractions. That would be interesting.